right into class?
Well, I want to introduce you
Okay.
briefly.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Sunday morning Bible class addition to our Living with Loss workshop. Dean Miller has been with us all weekend and has done a wonderful job. We're looking forward to another message from him. He's going to be talking to us about what do you do when you're overwhelmed. Dean.
Boy, that was a short introduction. I wasn't prepared for that. I guess that's what you do when you can't find out anything good to say about the person. Hey, let me clarify something right off the bat so that you don't misunderstand. If you see some WW on anything that I'm wearing, or Cheryl Wayne LaHawn, who is with me, he's from Carthage, Missouri. Both of us are widowers. And if you see anything that we're wearing with a WW on it, I just want to clarify something. That doesn't stand for Weight Watchers, okay? That stands for Widowhood Workshop. They wouldn't let us in Weight Watchers, I don't think. The ministry is called Widowhood Workshop because the most difficult loss that most people experience this side of eternity is the loss of their spouse. It's not a ministry that focuses solely on the struggles of the widowed or preparing people for widowhood, but it is a ministry that focuses on grief. And we thought it would be appropriate to name it the Widowhood Workshop Ministry because that is the harshest form of grief that most people experience in this life. I'm really thankful that you're here this morning. I want to encourage you to turn to Psalm 31. And while you're doing that, I do want to brag about something. I'm not one that typically brags, but I can't help but do it. I used to be the associate minister in Somerville, Tennessee. I was the first associate minister for the Somerville, Tennessee church, and I'm a Yankee. I'm from Ohio, and as a matter of fact, I travel with Buckeyes. Anybody ever come to this church and teach or preach and carry Buckeyes in his pocket? I didn't think so. I wanted something to say about me that was special. So I'm going to brag about that. The only one who ever taught and preached here with Buckeyes that he totes around everywhere he goes. Psalm 31, thank you very much for being here. I'm going to ask you to think out loud together with me here the first couple of minutes. So get your cranial juices flowing. And I want to ask you something about being overwhelmed. Give me a life experience where if somebody had that experience, and maybe it's even you or somebody you know, where they would just feel overwhelmed. Some kind of life experience where you just feel overwhelmed. Somebody give me one. Give me at least, in a group this large, surely we could come up with 4 or 5 life experiences that could be overwhelming. Somebody get us started. Taking care of somebody who has dementia, and then she said, even who happens to be your mother. Caregiving is the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. For 8.5 years, my wife went from healthy to death because of Parkinson's disease. And during that caregiving time in my life, there were times during those 8+ years that I snapped. Times that I wasn't myself. I was exhausted, thin-skinned, struggled mightily, but also prayed more passionately during that period in my life than I ever had previously. Caregiving is hard. It can be overwhelming, especially if it's someone that is near and dear to you. Give me another life experience where you might feel overwhelmed. When your child is diagnosed with cancer. Amelia is her name. She comes to church in Villa Rica, Georgia, and she was diagnosed with cancer at age 2. She struggled mightily. Their whole family struggled mightily. They were in a great time of grief not because of someone dying, but because of the loss of someone's health, their baby. Now, thank the Lord, according to the Scottish Rite and God working together, thank the Lord, she survived barely. I love going to church there because when I go to church there, I know Amelia's going to come and visit me. And those bright eyes, they look a whole lot brighter now than they did when she struggled terribly at age 2. So when a child gets cancer, not only the child, but the whole family can be overwhelmed. Give me another life example. Unexpectedly laid off. Being unexpectedly laid off. Yeah, here you are, you go to work, you've been going to work for maybe years. And then one day they come in and they just decide they don't need you anymore, and they just basically tell you, take a hike. You know you're in trouble if they come to you and they bring a box to your desk the morning that you arrive. Yeah, you stop and think about the loss of revenue that you begin thinking about and how that greatly, greatly changes your daily life. It can be overwhelming. Unemployment can be overwhelming. Laid off or fired. Give me another one. Divorce. Not everybody who has divorce in their story, their life story, chose it or wanted it. It takes 2 to get married, but it does not take 2 to get a divorce. It only takes 1 to blow it up. The person that you marry can change, and things can be totally different. Let me tell you about a girl who went to Freed-Hardeman, met a boy there, got married just a couple, 2-3 weeks after she graduated at age 22. At age 29, she leaves for work and her husband's in the shower. And when she comes back to the house that night, everything of his is gone. It's like he's disappeared from planet Earth. The only thing left was a wedding ring on the dining room table. She's 29 years old at that point, thought she married a Christian, someone who was going to have a until death do us part commitment. She was a preacher's kid. She was my daughter. Divorce is the loss of a precious blessing. Sometimes it can be a harsh blow, totally out of the blue. Sometimes it can be after marital struggles for quite a while. But we need to understand and appreciate how overwhelming the experience of divorce can be, and how that creates a tremendous amount of grief that we need to help those who are experiencing that storm to deal with. Somebody got one more?
When your grown kids move home with their kids.
When your grown kids come back home to live with you with their kids. I think that's more like chaos, is what that is. Oh my, isn't it amazing that in this rich, wonderful experience of life, in a beautiful world, but also a broken world, how that sometimes we can find ourselves in life experiences that are just overwhelming. There's a guy called Granger Smith. Some of you may know him if you're a country music fan. He's a platinum award-winning singer. And in 2019, he was outside, and one of his kids, named River, was a noisemaker. And they were outside, and all of a sudden, it dawned on Granger, he heard no noise. He immediately, real quickly, started looking around for River and found that 3-year-old boy face down in the swimming pool. Of course, they began to administer CPR, called 911. He was taken to the hospital, but River died. And Granger Smith wrote a book called Like a River. And it's the story of the overwhelming experience of losing his 3-year-old son. The moment you must leave the hospital with one less person than you arrived with. It's a loss, a pain, an ache that is too deep for words. My journey, he says, was messy, vulnerable, agonizing. It just about killed me. Though you can never truly move on from your loss, you can move forward. He's right. We can't move on from our losses, but we can move forward with our losses without that becoming our identity. Sometimes life is overwhelming, and it can be overwhelming for a number of different reasons. Now, when we become Christians and we have devoted ourselves to the Lord, genuinely and totally devoted ourselves to cultivating intimacy with the Lord, we do not get a get out of overwhelmed card for our life. Psalm 31, David, and when you think of David, what is that statement you always think about with David? It's hard not to mention his name without mentioning this description of him that's found once in the Old Testament, once in the New Testament. What kind of man was he? A man after God's own heart. Now, that's a seriously positive comment. Okay, Psalm 31. Look at verse 9 beginning. Have mercy on me, O Lord, for I am in trouble. You mean because he was a man after God's own heart, he still had to go through difficulties? God still permitted that to occur in his life? Even though he was a man after God's own heart? He said, my eyes waste away with grief. Yes, my soul and my body. For my life is spent with grief, and my years with sighing, and my strength fails because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away. Now, we need to keep in mind this is Hebrew poetry. And in poetry, there's metaphors and figurative language. He says, my bones waste away. Verse 11. I'm a reproach among all my enemies, but especially among my neighbors, and am repulsive to my acquaintances, and those who see me outside flee from me. I am forgotten like a dead man out of mind. I am like a broken vessel. For I hear the slander of many. Fear is on every side. While they take counsel together against me, they scheme to take away my life. This old boy, he was a mess. He was a serious mess. Just because he was a man after God's own heart did not exempt him from dealing with the difficulties of life. It's like you're drowning in the negative experiences or circumstances of your life. And you know, I don't know if you think this weirdly, as I do, but I've thought on occasion about if I had my choice of dying, what's the one way I definitely would not want to die? I don't know if you think that's strange or not, but for me, it's drowning. It's drowning. For some reason, I don't want to die that way. But boy, some people die, and I'm not talking about physically, but some people die whenever they are drowning in the negative circumstances of life. They lose their life to the circumstances. Crushed is another synonym. And sometimes it's like being in a vice grip, and it just keeps getting tighter and tighter. You just feel like you're being crushed. You're carrying this burden, and you get so tired, and the burden becomes heavier the longer that you carry it, and it's just overwhelming when you feel that way. And that's the way David is feeling in Psalm 31. And I'm so appreciative that here this great man of God is being so transparent about his struggle. Because could we be honest enough to admit that in the church, and it's not just in the church, it's in the world too, sometimes we just won't admit what a mess we are because we don't want other people to think that we're weak. We need to get over that. We need to get to the point where we are more transparent. How in the world is a brother or sister in the Lord going to help you if they don't even know that you need help? If you keep acting like you got it all together, nobody's going to be aware of the fact you need help. Everybody needs a trust group. At the very least, we need a trust group. People that can be our go-to people, people that we can be transparent with, people that we can share things with that maybe we wouldn't share with other people, people that we can trust to help us. I don't know how many of you are music lovers. Maddie and Tay, they sing this song about people need people. Locate that on YouTube. The lyrics of that song are powerful. And it's right. People need people. People need people when we're prospering and enjoying a lot of wonderful blessings. People need people when we're struggling too. It's really important for us to understand how blessed we are by God, providentially, to be gifted with the people that we have in our lives. And among those people we have in our lives, we need to cultivate relationships that can help us when we're so overwhelmed. We need to have people we can be honest with about our circumstances. What should you do? Well, David shares in Psalm 31 what he did. Look at verse 1. In you, O Lord, I put my trust. Now, somebody's got another translation. Instead of, in you, O Lord, I put my trust, what do you have? Taken refuge. Taken refuge. Now, let's assume for a minute that Tim, being such a conscientious and caring minister in this church, he hears about this tornado that's coming. And out of his concern, he makes sure that a text is sent out to every single one of you, and he warns you about this tornado coming, and he tells you, everyone go to the nearest mobile home park for refuge. Not a good idea, right? Okay. What happens sometimes in our lives when we have a stormy time in our life and we are overwhelmed, what we choose to do is self-medicate with an inadequate refuge. For some people, it's a bottle that's got some high-powered liquid in it, alcohol. And when that doesn't work, then you can pump it up and you can go the meth route. Or maybe you even want to go to the level of heroin. Or if you're overwhelmed, you might choose sexual immorality, to have that fleeting experience that you think somehow is going to help you through that overwhelming time in your life. Sometimes people who are struggling with a mental sickness, which, by the way, is nothing to be ashamed of. We have physical illness. We have mental illness. There's no shame in mental illness any more than there's shame in being a Parkinson's patient or a cancer patient. It happens. And because of maybe a clinical depression, there's this determination to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You don't need no professional help. You're a Christian. Well, the reality is sometimes what we need to realize is our own wisdom and our own strength is an inadequate place to take refuge and to find help. David understood that he needed the Lord. Do you know when you are most likely to understand and really fully appreciate and internalize the reality that you need the Lord? Do you know when you're most likely to appreciate that fact? In deep darkness, in scary, stormy times in your life. Well, I'll tell you, when my wife was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and started tanking much faster than the typical Parkinson's patient, and I was struggling with that Parkinson's disease caregiving, boy, there were times that on my knees, literally, I couldn't talk to the Lord because I couldn't get the words out. I was so emotional. And at that point, I was so thankful that He listens to our heart. Sometimes it's the awful things that we experience in our life that help us realize how much we need the Lord. We need to find our refuge in Him. We need to trust in Him. But it's not only there. It's not only in verse 1. Now, verse 1 again, in you, O Lord, I put my trust, or I take my refuge. Then drop down to verse 6. I've hated those who regard useless idols, but I trust in the Lord. And then notice, drop down here to verse 14. But as for me, I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. And then he explains a little bit about what that trust is all about. Verse 15, my times are in your hand. Sometimes we sing about the hollow of the hand of God. What we need to understand and appreciate is the safest place in an overwhelming time in our life is to lay everything we have and everything that we are in the hollow of the hand of God, who loves us more than anybody else does, who's more powerful than anybody else is, and who has infinite wisdom. And as a matter of fact, notice the plea of this trusting heart at the end of verse 3. He cries out and he says, lead me and guide me. That's what a trusting heart does. A trusting heart understands and appreciates the fact, I ain't got this. But God knows. And God does. And we need to understand and appreciate the fact that we need the Lord. Oh, we sing that song, I need thee, oh, I need thee, every hour I need thee. We have sung that song so many times. It is really easy. It's a temptation to sing that song very flippantly because we've already sung it a whole bunch of times and we know the melody. So we observe the Passover. A different kind of Passover than the Jewish people. We just pass over the lyrics, the serious message of the lyrics. Be with me, Lord. I cannot live without you. Sometimes we don't always sense that. We don't always really appreciate that fact in times of prosperity. We're on a roll. But when we are in a storm, a really, really bad, scary, stormy time in our life, when we're overwhelmed, that is the time that we most frequently will sing songs like that most passionately. And then notice here this verse 5. We think about Jesus on the cross when we read these words. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You see, that's what trust is. Trust is taking everything that you are and everything you have and laying it in the hollow of the hand of God and finding peace in a storm because you know that God's got this and I've got God and this is going to be okay. I don't know when and I don't know how, but I know this is going to be okay. And it's not because I've got this, it's because God's got this and I've got God. Trust the Lord. Trust in the Lord in times of prosperity so that we will choose to use our prosperity for the glory of God by blessing other people. And then when adversity strikes, use that adversity for the glory of God by continuing to be faithful to Him and praise Him and be a blessing to others as you, because of your experience and your accumulated wisdom, now can help other people with the same or similar circumstances. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we pray that we have rough times to get better. You don't need to do that. Satan's going to take care of that for you. That's why we need to be sober and be vigilant. 1 Peter 5:8. He's out after us. God's a blesser. Satan is the tempter and the trier. Do we really believe in Satan? When was the last time you ever heard somebody who was just overwhelmed by what they were going through say stuff like, I hate Satan. I hate what he's done in my life. Got in Satan's face and said, I'm not going to let you bring me down. I am not going to leave the Lord. I know what you're trying to do in my life. When was the last time you ever had somebody blame the devil for what was going on in their life? Good for you. Did you notice how many people said that? One in a rather large group. I really do wonder if we believe in a personal devil. Now, I know we believe in evil. I'm not talking about believing in evil generically. I'm talking about believing in the devil, a personal being. God's on the throne. He's in heaven and on earth. But Satan's here too. I'm not suggesting Satan is anywhere near as strong as God is. I'm just saying he's present. We are living in a holy war. You have no choice because you live in a world where there's a holy war going on. Satan is looking at you like fresh meat. And he is going to be after you. He's going to be after your marriage. He's going to be after your family. He's going to be after your prosperity. We have got to awaken ourselves to the reality that we live in a world of warfare, spiritual warfare. Get your game face on, because it's going to be like this until the day you take your last breath. But man, heaven's going to be worth it all. We need to make sure that we trust in the Lord. But will we admit that that's sometimes hard? There's some lyrics that I really appreciate that I first heard Lauren Daigle sing. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. I love those lyrics. We need to make sure that when we're overwhelmed, we become more determined maybe than we've ever been before. Trust in the Lord. Well, that's not all. If you go a little bit later in the psalm, after talking about trusting God, he talks about something very positive. He talks about remembering the goodness of God. Now, here's something that is hard to do. And Job, and we talked about this Friday and Saturday in the workshop, Job is a good example of a great man of God who, because of what he was experiencing, permitted his burdens to blind him to his blessings. See, even great men of God and great women of God can be so impacted by negative circumstances in their life and so overwhelmed that they can't see their blessings because they feel so burdened. Now, proof of that, just quickly, a quick reference, Job 14:1. Man that's born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. He said in Job 7:6, my days are swifter than a weaver's shuttle and are spent without hope. Job, you had hope, you had God. You were married. Now, that's supposed to be a blessing, right, guys? Okay. He had God. He had a wife to help him in bearing those burdens. He wasn't a perfect husband. She wasn't a perfect wife. But he had life, and that's a blessing, isn't it? Job had blessings, but he wasn't feeling it because all he was thinking about was his burdens. And he even decided he had no hope. That's what his feeler was screaming inside of him. That's what he felt like, but he had God, and if you have God, you have hope. So Job was really messed up. He couldn't see the blessings he had because he was so terribly burdened in his life. If that could happen to Job, could it happen to me? Could it happen to you? Don't let it happen, though. David didn't let it happen. Look at what he says here. Now, he's a train wreck. He is a mess. We read in verses 9 through 13. But verse 19, he breaks forth in praise. Oh, how great is your goodness, which you've laid up for those who fear you, which you have prepared for those who trust in you in the presence of the sons of men. You shall hide them in the secret place of your presence from the plots of man. You shall keep them secretly in a pavilion from the strife of tongues. Blessed be the Lord, for he has shown me his marvelous kindness in a strong city. Now, notice verse 19 and verse 21. In verse 19, the goodness of God is referenced, but there's a modifier. What's the modifier of the goodness of God in verse 19? Did you sleep in English class? Nouns, great. Oh, how great is your goodness. He's got a whole heap a lot of goodness. Now, your life might have a whole heap a lot of badness. But God has great goodness. David realized that, and he felt that. That was internalized, even in the stormy time of his life. And then down at verse 21, kindness is mentioned, but there's a modifier with the kindness. What's it say about his kindness? Marvelous kindness. Now here he is, he's a mess. He's not okay. He's way worse than not okay. But yet, he recognizes the goodness of God and the marvelous kindness of God. You think that'd help you when you're overwhelmed? Because you see, he's sitting on the throne. He's your Father in heaven. He loves you more than anybody else. He knows what's going on around you. He knows what's going on inside of you. He knows how to provide for you. What a tremendous lift that is. To be able to focus on the goodness of God when there's so much badness in your life. My kids were raised on the Smurfs. Now, some of you will have to Google that. Gargamel and Azrael were the enemies. Every episode. It just dawned on me, I'm surprised my kids turned out so good watching Gargamel and Azrael be such a terrible effect on the Smurfs. One day, Gargamel and Azrael got all the Smurfs together and created a ring of fire around them, and they were going to make the Smurfs toast. And this ring of fire was burning and burning and burning. And Papa Smurf, he was the wise one. Papa Smurf said, "Sing with me, Smurfs. Sing with me." Now, I'm going to spare you the melody. I'll quote you the words of what Papa Smurf told the Smurfs to sing when they were in the circle of fire and going to become toast. Goodness makes the badness go away. Goodness makes you happy every day. Badness cannot start if there's goodness in your heart. Goodness makes the badness go away. Now, I'm not suggesting that's literally true, but you see what Papa Smurf was doing, and by the way, as they sang that song, he said, "Keep singing it, Smurfs, keep singing it." Guess what happened to the ring of fire? It began to descend, and they were safe. He was trying to get them to think positively about goodness when they were experiencing badness at the hands of Azrael and life can be so hard, so hard. And sometimes our life, we can just have our mind, because of our life, become so negative. That's why, and we're going to be talking about this in the sermon time, in our time of worship, it's so important that when we're struggling in our life, don't let that keep you from coming to the public assemblies of the Lord's church. Man, that's where you need to be. When you don't feel like being there, that's probably more than any time when you need to be there. Don't let the ugly things you experience in life and the overwhelming feelings that you have in your life keep you from the Lord and His family. Well, not only does he talk about trusting God, not only does he talk about remembering the goodness of God, he talks about waiting on the Lord or hoping in the Lord. And notice here at the end of the psalm, the last couple of verses, 23 and 24. "Oh, love the Lord, all of his saints, for the Lord preserves the faithful and fully repays the proud person. Be of good courage. He shall strengthen your heart, all you who hope in the Lord." And some translations say, instead of hope in the Lord, wait on the Lord. I suspicion this church probably sings this song. Teach me, Lord, to wait. How do you learn to wait? Well, having to wait and struggling. Difficult experiences can try us and stretch us and help us to become better at a lot of things. And one of the things is waiting on the Lord. There are times in your life when you're in God's waiting room. You may not want to be there, but you're there. And you have no idea how long. It's like going to the doctor. You have no idea how long you're going to wait, how long you're going to get out of that waiting room. But there's a reason, there's a purpose, there's a value in being in that waiting room. What about a cocoon broken before its time? What about eggs in an incubator taken out before their time? Not a good idea. You can assign a purpose to every phase of life that you're in that is so terribly hard for you to deal with. And that purpose is your growth. And the thing you need to shoot for isn't learning to cope in the beginning of that awful time. You need to shoot for survival. You don't need to be thinking about coping until you learn to survive. And I'm not talking about sometimes day to day, I'm talking about hour to hour. Sometimes life can be that bad that it's about getting to the next hour. And we need to do that with the Lord. You know, when you go to the restaurant and we have these people, you might refer to them as a waiter or a waitress, what do? They serve. What does a person do who waits on the Lord? They keep serving the Lord. Clueless about where all this is going, but they just keep waiting on the Lord. Hope is faith about the future. That's what hope is. Hope is faith about the future. So you just keep waiting, keep hoping, keep serving the Lord, because you know that's what you need to do. And the Lord's with you every step of the way. Isaiah has a Hobby Lobby verse in the Bible. You probably don't know this, but take note of the fact that the man who came with Buckeyes in his pocket shared this with you. This is the Hobby Lobby verse in the Bible. It's the last verse of Isaiah 40. Now, I call it a Hobby Lobby verse because you see it on some home interior products in stores like Hobby Lobby. Now, this is a very familiar passage, but I'll tell you, I believe in the old Charles Hodge philosophy. He said, familiar scriptures ought to be read more carefully. I don't know how many times I saw that in print, that he wrote that or heard him say that. And he's right. Familiar scriptures ought to be read more carefully. Now, here's the verse. But those who wait on the Lord, there's that word, wait, could be hope. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Now, what do you need when you're overwhelmed? You need strength. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. Now, I want to share with you the context of that passage because it really helps to see the value of that last verse. What is the latter half of this chapter all about? Watch. Isaiah 40, if you happen to be able to find that on your phone or in a Bible, I'm going to start referencing some passages. I'm going to start at verse 21. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood from the foundations of the earth? It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in. He brings the princes to nothing, and he makes the judges of earth useless. Verse 28. Have you not known? Have you not heard? Now, wait a minute. We just read that in verse 21. And the emphasis is on the amazing majesty and glory of God. So now, verse 28, we're getting closer to that last verse. Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the weak. To those who have no might, he increases strength. Even youths shall faint and be weary, and young men shall utterly fall. But those who wait on the Lord, now do you see the context? Our God is an awesome God. Our God has unsearchable wisdom. He is omnipotent. He is all powerful. Even young people run out of gas and get weary. And the Lord is our source of wisdom and strength. He can help us mount up with wings like eagles, run and not be weary, walk and not be faint. The best of us, in the hot kettle of trials, feeling so overwhelmed, are at risk because we're human. The trouble with being a Christian is you still have to be a human. You're not a robot. You can't just push buttons. Life can be a struggle. We need to remember when our life tanks. Keep trusting God with everything you have and everything you are. Do not permit the burdens in your life to blind you to blessings, to positives. Remember the goodness of God. Wait on the Lord. Don't give up on the Lord. He's your real, only dependable, trustworthy help. People sometimes fail us, desert us, sometimes even sin against us. But God can totally, always be depended upon. That needs to be our focus when we're so terribly overwhelmed in our life. At the conclusion of this class, I want to share with you something that I think is very important to share, because a lot of people are clueless about widowhood until it happens to them. I know. I are one of those people. It happened to me on Christmas morning of 2013, after 8.5 years of caregiving. That's when she took her last breath at 9:40 in the morning. I had no idea how overwhelming the experience is of losing a spouse, a beloved spouse. This is the beginning of the introduction of one of the books out there on a table display in the foyer. Imagine a single event that will dramatically change your calendar, your checkbook, your friendship network, the contents of your refrigerator, the temperature that you set your thermostat, your outlook on your future, and your connection with your children, and that's not all. Your appearance may change, your emotions, your sleep patterns, your theology, your social status, and possibly your address. I experienced most of these changes and more beginning April 21, 2006, the day that I became a widow. I don't like that word, and I will not check that box to identify myself. Do you have any idea that it was that tough, even for people of faith? Bad marriages end in many ugly ways. Good marriages only end one way. I had no idea when I was 19 years old. And that other person, that girl, was 19 years old. And we both said, I do. I was volunteering to become a prospective widowed person. I had no idea. Why would I have even thought of that? At 19, though I thought I knew everything, I found out I didn't. But that is the reality. If we believe in the value of premarital counseling before somebody gets married, because that's a big time transition, maybe we ought to see the value of helping married people understand about the transition from being married to being widowed, since a good marriage always leaves one person behind. There's value for married people to learn about the storm of the loss of a spouse and learning to live with it. There's great value in that. Brother and Sister Maldonado came to me at the end of a workshop in Alamosa, Colorado. He was 80 years old at the time, she a couple years younger. And they came up to me and said, Dean, we want you to know that this workshop has been a tremendous blessing to our marriage. I thought at 80 years old, they knew everything. I really did. He said, you know, Dean, he said, we went home last night and we sat and talked about what we really liked about being married to one another. He said, this workshop has really helped our marriage. One of the things that can enrich marriages, as well as help people for the overwhelming experience of loss, is studying about widowhood. Not that you should focus on it or dwell on it, but you do need to be aware of it because it happens in every good marriage. The Widowhood Workshop Ministry is about helping people with troubles and trials and the grief that they experience because of it, but with some special attention occasionally on the loss of a spouse. I would appreciate you going to the website, widowhoodworkshop.com, or if you're on Facebook, I would love for you to do this. Go to your search bar on Facebook and plug in 3 words, Widowhood Workshop Ministry. That's the title of our public Facebook page. And doing those 2 things could help the ministry, and maybe you could share that with some other folks. Thank you very much for your attention this morning.